All right. Hello, everybody. Hope you all are doing well. This is DFS Army's pre-lock show for NBA. We had a pretty good day on Monday. Of course, Giddy and someone else probably ruined what could have been a fantastic night, but it was a pretty good one. Fire all over the place, but, always room for development still. Diego, good to see you. Tyrell, Harlock, good to see the whole crew in here. There's a 10-game slate, so we have a lot of games to get to. There's a shit ton of injury news that we have to talk through, and a lot of it we don't have yet. We'll probably get some of it during this show, so we'll keep a good eye on that. But let's jump into it. I think there's some ways and spots we can get different, and there's a lot of good game environments too, and there's a lot of value on this slate. So definitely a studs and duds moment. Ricky, good to see you, man. Glad you're new. Happy to help out. Towards the end of the show, I'll answer more questions if we have time to, but I typically like to start off by just kind of going through my overall strategy for this slate. For those of you that don't know, this is DFS Army's Optimizer. The link is in the description if you're interested in joining DFS Army. Feel free to use promo code Bob BOB for a 10% discount if you want access to it, and our Discord where we're constantly giving advice from some really good DFS players, including myself. Cujo, Rick, good to see y'all. Glad to know y'all are sticking it out. Let's start off with this first game, the Magic against the Pacers. If you aren't keeping track of the news, on paper, this game would look not overly exciting because the Magic typically aren't, but Paolo is still out. Wendell Carter Jr. is out. And so that automatically makes us more interested in this team. The two guys who have been benefiting from Paolo being out the most have been Franz Wagner and Jalen Suggs. Those are two guys I want to see showing up in my lines. They are still too cheap when there isn't really a star player on this team, and they both can be explosive. Jalen Suggs, I have a like on. He was showing up naturally for me, but look, just like that one run, never mind. I'm lying. He's showing up in 41% of my lines. I'm significantly over the field on Jalen Suggs, and I like him. We've been on him for a while, and he's been coming through for us, and he still isn't priced appropriately, in my opinion, in a pretty solid matchup. Franz, I'm going to go ahead and put a 10% min on to make sure he shows up the amount I want to see him show up in my lines. There are other viable plays here. Goga should start with Wendell Carter out. And then we should, so Goga is slightly more viable. He's not someone I'm overly excited about because there's other value center plays and just value plays I like a bit more on this slate. But yeah, that's pretty much my plan for the Magic tonight. I'm forcing in Franz, forcing in Suggs. Let's see. When we look at usage rate information with those two guys out, we do see guys like Gary Harris typically see an increasing usage rate. Cole Anthony sees an increasing usage rates. But for me, at this point, I think that's more of like a weird. We don't have enough data points of how good Suggs and Wagner are. Or Wagner, I'm just not going to force it. OG, what's up, man? I'm trying. Good to see y'all too. Just joined this weekend, Michael. Sweet. Yeah, happy to help. If you need anything, feel free to reach out in the Discord. OG, now you can listen without interruption. No worries. Mo, good to see you as well, man. All right, so yeah, let's keep on track. The priorities are Franz and Suggs, and then I'm really trusting the DS to do its thing from there. Goga is viable, but not someone I'm trying to force exposure to. For the Pacers, this is typically a team the Magic are a team I don't typically like to pick on too much. They're a pretty solid defense, but they're missing Paolo and Wendell Carter Jr., two pretty solid defensive players. We do know that Aaron Nesmith is out. That makes Mathurin more viable. He's a starter here in this situation when he's not playing. Isaiah Jackson's still out. Wiseman's going to be out for a good bit. The big question here is Andrew Nembhard. I already like Mathurin a little bit. I think I might be saying his name wrong. I always forget. But I like Benedict a good amount here on this slate already. He's showing up in my lines naturally around 3%. I would like that to be a little bit more. I'm going to put a like on him and see if that changes things. Before I was getting like 40% when I had a like on him, and that felt like too much. But I do want him to show up. He becomes more of a necessity for me if Nimbard gets ruled out. I mean, he'll be super chalky in that case because he sees a nice increase in usage. He'll have more opportunities to score in this situation, but it's more of a wait and see. Sim model also liked Mather in a good bit, so that helps. Miles Turner, we never love playing a chalky Miles Turner because he usually burns us because of foul trouble or because he just does nothing. But with Wendell Carter Jr. being ruled out, the matchup is significantly softer. We know Goga's not a great defensive player. We picked on this a bit last year. I like forcing exposure to Miles Turner. I have a 10% min on him currently. Part of the situation here is that there's a lot of really good center plays. So usually when I put a min on someone, I like to make sure that means I'm at least being over the field on them. But in this situation on this slate, because there are just so many center plays I like, I just wanted to make sure he was at least showing up. And so that's why I had the 10% min. Siakam, I think there's better spots, unfortunately. He's seeing some ownership. He's not showing up much for me at all, and I'm okay with that. And then Halliburton at 8K. Again, I don't love the matchup here. So he's not showing up for me, and I am totally fine with that. Okay, next up we have the Pistons. Wait, let me see. What are y'all saying? Jose, good to see you, man. You haven't missed much yet. Nothing too crazy. I'll have the leverage sheets done after this show. I already have a couple of the players I like on the leverage sheet under the cheat sheet section here for us for DFS Army, but we'll see. Chris, looking for great bench options. Honestly, you probably don't need those options because we have good value, but we'll touch on that as we go through these games. Thomas Dye, good to see you, man. Hope you're doing all right. Let's look at the Pistons. So this game is a relatively low total. Both of these two teams are playing at pretty slow paces these days, so I'm not as excited about this game as I historically would be, and you can tell the sports books aren't either. It's one of the lower totals on the slate, but bigs against the Hornets. The Hornets are missing Richards, and they're missing Mike Williams. They're missing, is it Mark Williams? They're missing both of their centers, and they're already not good defending in the paint. So this is a spot where I want to pick on them in the paint with Jalen Duren, who's only 5,900 and only 8% owned. He was one of the easier calls for me to force exposure to. You can already tell I have a minimum on him. I'm going to be significantly over the field on him. Let's see, where are we at with no real injury news for the Pistons, which, makes them a little bit less exciting when we have a slate with a good amount already. So again, these guys aren't standing out for me too much, but they are projecting well, so they do show up in your lines. So guys like Jaden Ivey, again, matchup's not bad. It's really just the pace that worries me. He has 13% ownership. He's 6,100. Not a guy I'm forcing in, but the DS likes him, so I'll allow him to be in 19% of my lines. I'm not going to do anything to tinker with that, but not my favorite play on the slate. Tobias Harris, the sim model likes a little bit, so I'll allow him to be around field weight exposure. We talk about him on every slate, it feels like. He's never someone I'm excited to play. And then Cade Cunningham is showing up in about 3% of my lines, which is fine. I like other point guards a bit more, so I'm not going crazy here. But we have seen guards light up the Hornets before. They're just not a good defensive team, but because of the pace, they haven't been allowing too many wild games. Cinzy, what's up, man? You're just now trying to get back into NBA? Yeah, man, you are a GOAT. I appreciate the watch and the support. Yeah, let's try to make it happen. Mo, we're not there yet. Spoilers, man. Spoilers. Hunter is out. All right, let me see. Man, we're going to keep getting injury news all slate. I did see that LaMelo Ball is a game time decision. That's going to be a pain. Herter's available. Trae Young's available. Roddy is. Hunter is out. Yeah, good call. We'll touch on that when we get there. Thank you for letting me know. Mr. 5, good to see you, man. I feel like I haven't seen you in a minute. So for the Hornets, it's hard to talk about them right now because everything revolves around LaMelo Ball. He is questionable. He's a game time decision, like I just touched on. If he's out, this team becomes a team I want to have exposure to. Trey Mann becomes one of the better value plays on the slate, and we already have a lot. So it will make us pick and choose in some spots, but he's someone I am going to force into lines. Miles Bridges and Brandon Miller, they become much more viable plays. Let me see. I feel like I have something going off. All right. I think it's done. So, yeah, LaMelo Ball, he is going to dictate everything that we do. Madden Dad of 3, good to see you, man. Appreciate your message earlier. Meant a lot. I'm 150 maxing tonight. I used to 20 max a lot. It's just not something I do too much of anymore, but the slate itself wouldn't have really dictated that for me one way or the other. So yeah, LaMelo Ball is really going to dictate what I do, but for now, I'm going to let me make sure someone turns this off. You stop the timer. All right. So yeah, for me, I can't really talk about the Hornets too much here because if Ball plays, I'm not looking at any of these guys. All right, the Knicks are a team I do want to force exposure to tonight. We have a really soft matchup in the Hawks. We have a good game total around 226. The spread is, healthy at 7 points. It is one of the wider spreads on the slate, but I'm not overly concerned. For me, it's really looking my first max out night tonight. All right, I see. Diego, appreciate you. If you all could hit the like button, that would be awesome. Harlock, spoilers again, man. I'm kidding. Totally kidding. No, Brunson is in a fantastic spot. We've been playing guards against the Hawks all season long, along with playing guards against Milwaukee and a few other spots. And we've been smashing in these spots. I've been on Brunson for a while, and he's been disappointing me. So it's limited how excited I am. I think Kat and him taking more threes and just having a bit of a higher usage rate than Randall does is kind of limiting his upside a good bit. But at 8,700, he becomes more viable for me. As you can see, I have a 15% min on him. I'm going to force him in. So I think this is a smash spot for him. Cat is someone I also really like on this slate. This is a sim model play and also a just low-owned, high-usage player in a great spot against the Hawks. We know this is not a team I care about defensively. Next up, we have Bridges and OG. Bridges is someone that I like, and it makes me nervous to say that, but he's shown some upside this season already. Let's just see what Knicks show up in the DS by themselves. Because I have that like on OG, he's showing up around 49%. As news breaks, I will probably take the like off of him and just make sure he continues to stay in my lines. But I just want to make sure I emphasize I like OG more than Bridges today. And then Cat, significantly over the field on him. I won't say much more than that. Brunson, I have that min on. And then Bridges is still showing up in my lines. Again, this is a soft matchup against a Hawks team that is not good defensively. So I'm comfortable with these guys showing up. And yeah, I mean, I like the Knicks tonight. The only problem is that they don't have the same injury issues as every other team on this slate. So it makes it a little bit harder to continue to find these guys as viable options. But with Hunter or the Knicks is what I mean. Like the Knicks are relatively healthy on this slate, so it makes it a little bit harder to force exposure to some of these guys. But I still think they're just in such a soft matchup. I want to make sure I'm mixing them in with some of the other value plays from teams that do have injuries. Yeah, I see you play music. I like it. I like it. What's King who's out for Charlotte again? That's the last thing. For Charlotte, you heard me say it? Yeah, it's really just LaMelo that we're waiting on. Mo, I don't like Hart. I think we have better viable options at that position. And so he didn't stand out for me at his price tag on this slate. He is seeing ownership and the matchup is soft. So, and we know the Knicks play a ton of minutes. That's also why they are always viable options. So he's not bad. I'm not going out of my way to take him out. He's just not showing up in my lines, at least in the DS right now. And there's a lot of plays I do like a lot on this slate. So he didn't make my short list. And I think part of it is we'll get to the Nuggets, but that situation is nuts today. All right. For the Atlanta Hawks, we will start off with them. We found out Hunter is out. That does make things a little bit more interesting. I mean, it just means Ricochet is probably going to continue to start here. But at his price tag, we're not really getting extreme value. So I'll trust the DS. I'll continue to update it and just kind of see how projections change. But he's still not popping too much. So not a spot I'm trying to get cute at. The Knicks are a good defensive team. I mean, you can make an argument for Jalen Johnson, but at 8,700, again, I just think we have better value options on this slate and studs who can break the slate in really soft matchups. So I'm not trying to pay up too much for guys I don't think are worth it. Trae Young being above 10K is ridiculous. So yeah, the Hawks aren't really on my radar, even with Hunter being ruled out. And they're not showing up in any of my lines right now, and I'm comfortable with that. The Warriors, you all know I'm not the biggest fan of. I actually do like the Warriors as a team. It's just when it comes to DFS, I don't love them. Podziemski's listed as questionable. He's going through an illness. With Curry back, Steph, I'm not overly excited about this team. We know the Celtics are a tough matchup. You can make the argument that this is one of the higher total games. It's the third highest total game on the slate. So you might want to force exposure here. But for me in a tough matchup, I'm struggling to try to find a spot that makes any sense to me. So the Warriors just aren't on my radar on this slate, and they're another team I can just keep moving past. The Celtics are a different story, though, primarily because the Celtics have injuries. Jaylen Brown, injured. That is huge. They keep changing the starting lineup. We saw it happen on Monday, so we'll see what happens here. We saw Queta, the 3,200 center start last time out. He's definitely a viable play if he starts, but we have to wait and see what happens again. They swung Horford to the 4. So, that's another route they could take. We have seen them start Cornette before. And so I think if Cornette starts, my interest in Nemias is just not that high. But that's a more of a wait and see situation. But the two plays I do like, I am forcing exposure to Jason Tatum at 11% ownership. He's pricey, but we have the value on the slate to pay up for him. He's someone I want to make sure I get exposure to. I was going to make him the thumbnail today, but he's been a thumbnail for like already 2 slates out of the 5 or 8 we've done shows for. And so I think Jason Tatum is someone that you want to force exposure to. I might continue to increase my exposure to him with this being a high total game, depending on news and like more value that we get. Let's see. Derek White is someone that was showing up for me naturally, but I don't think he is anymore. Tatum, you can see him there. Derek White is now only showing up in about 7% of my lines. Let me see. Is that because of... See, I don't really love the shooting guard position today. So I am comfortable forcing exposure to Derek White because this isn't one of those spots where we have a ton of value. So I am going to put a 15% min on White just to kind of make sure I'm at least around field weight. And then I have a soft spot for Drew, but he hasn't been showing that upside here recently. But I don't think it's crazy to take small shots on him. Let me see. Does a sim model like him at all? 5,600. I doubt it. I think I was looking at him earlier. It likes other guys just so much more. And we have other value. It's hard to get excited about him. Let's see. Tattoo, what's up, man? He said, do we have a list of guys who need a night off because they are already tired from this long season? Tattoo, you're always making fun of the NBA guys. They are soft, though, so I can't lie. You're capping him 0 Hawks. Yeah, I'm not looking at the Hawks too much today. Queta, yeah, let's see. How much do I have of him? I'm just trusting the DS there. I have around 7%. I'm significantly under the field. You can call it a fade if you want to. I mean, it basically is. But if he starts, that's when he becomes more interesting for me. But I don't trust their coach enough to not switch things up once again. Only Warrior I really ever like is Steph. Everyone else is always usually a hell no. You're not wrong. I am kind of mad I didn't play Draymond for the narrative in that last game. That would have made a lot of sense. I should have forced more exposure there. Yeah, I agree. Shooting guard's just a weird one today. Ivy's not bad. Like I said earlier with the Pistons, I just don't love it. So that's part of why I'm forcing in White, because he does provide a bit more stability there. If I really want to get cute, I would only put him at shooting guard. I don't think that's a bad call. It's just something I don't typically do, so I'm not going to start today. Next up, we have the second highest game total on the slate. This is a game I want to force exposure to just because it's supposed to have the most points, and that's just part of my process. I always force exposure to these games that have good game environments because the sports books are right more often than they're not there. So for me, the tough part about this is we don't really know who's going to play yet. Anthony Davis is questionable. That is another just huge piece of news that we're waiting on for this slate. Anthony Davis is projected to be 15% owned. If he plays tonight, he's a viable play. He's someone I'm going to force exposure to. If he doesn't play, LeBron James is already at 25% ownership. The matchup against the Grizzlies is nice. They play at a nice pace. And so that's part of it. That ownership will skyrocket if Anthony Davis goes up, and I'm willing to match wherever we end up being. Outside of that, none of the other Lakers are standing out to me too much. LeBron was just the obvious call. Austin Reeves is showing up in about 5% of my lines, but I'm still significantly under the field. AD is showing up in 3%. But again, if we get that news in time, I'll boost some exposure to him to make sure he shows up in a good game environment. But I'm just waiting for that. Rui is questionable. He's battling an illness. So there's a world we could get Anthony Davis out and Rui out, which would mean we see like a 3,800 connect play, or we have even Reddish maybe start, right? Yeah, with Rui potentially out. Those are really the most viable options. So even more value could be had on this slate, and it's chalk. I would assume they'll be chalky. If they're not chalky, that's just stupid. But if Rui is out, whoever starts is someone I want to be significantly over the field on. I would love for it to be Dalton Connect. At 3,800, I love that price tag, and it's even better if Anthony Davis is out. If Davis is out too, I don't want to forget about guys like Austin Reeves and D'Angelo Russell. This is a game I want to be very, very over the field on. It's just hard for me to be right now because we don't have that news yet. So keep an eye out. Yep, Mo, you're right on. Thomas, I'm right there with you. Love LeBron. Love him. Nice, OG. Glad the knee surgery went well. Total knee replacement. I'm hoping the rehab goes well, man. I know you were talking about being able to sit back and relax and actually take some information in now because you're usually so busy. So maybe this is good to just kind of force you to stay still for a little bit. All right. So yeah, I love the Lakers, but keep an eye out for the news. That's going to dictate how much exposure we force to these guys. For the Grizzlies, not as much injury news here. For Memphis, Bane has been out. Marcus has been out. Not really new information. We all know I love playing guards against the Lakers. I am forcing exposure to Ja. He's been so good lately. From a DFS standpoint, he's had some ceiling performances, but not as consistently as we would like for him to have at this price tag, 9,200. I do like the matchup against the Lakers, though, and so he's someone that I am going to make sure I'm significantly over the field on. Outside of that, none of the other Grizzlies are appealing to me at all. I mean, you can take a shot on Zach Edey, but again, I just feel like we have better options on the slate. Zach has shown like he can definitely get hot and he has some upside, but it's just hard for me to get overly excited about him these days when we know how bad he can be too. He's young. He's young. He had a great game against Brooklyn, but that's pretty much the only great game we've seen from him so far. So yeah, pretty much just Ja for me. Let's see. Does anyone else show up? Nope. It's just Ja. And then we go from there. Spurs have the lowest game total on the slate. I am forcing exposure to this team still, though. We know Victor has upside all day long, but he's not really a priority for me when it comes to the studs. But I do like just having exposure to him on this slate when we have the value to afford studs. I just want a nice mixture. And so that's why you see Men's on the studs that did stand out for me. Even in the sim, he stood out a little bit. So that's why I wanted to force some exposure to him there. Chris Paul, Sim model liked him. He's cheap. He's 5,900. Let me look a little bit closer at his more recent performance, though, just so I make sure I'm not missing something too bad. Yeah, at his price tag, he's been like in that 6K range. He's shown he does have up to 50-point upside in good game environments. This isn't really the best game environment. There's not a revenge narrative here. Chris Paul doesn't care about the Rockets, but you can make one if you really want to. But I just like the price tag. The sim model liked him. That's pretty much why I'm forcing exposure to him. He started to fall out of my lines. And honestly, if LaMelo ends up getting ruled out, I might take this min off of him because I do think Trey Mann will just become a really, really good play in that situation. So the 20% min might fall off on Chris Paul, but for now, the information that we have, I'm going to keep it. And then Castle Stefan is not really someone I'm overly excited about either, but he is showing up in a couple of lines around 4%. Still, I'm going to be significantly under the field. I'll look a little bit closer at him too, just to kind of see if I'm missing anything, but he hasn't really shown any true upside so far this season. So just not a player I'm looking forward to trying to force exposure to. And there's no real, well, I mean, Sohan's out. So I think that's probably why we expect him to see a little bit more run. That wouldn't shock me, actually. So I understand the ownership. Let me see. What's his usage rate like? Let's see. And to look at usage rates, I go to the research station right here on DFS Army. And again, link in the description if you're curious for that. He's 4K. Have it in reverse order. Castle. Not a bad usage rate. Let me look at the Spurs. So now, I mean, Keldon Johnson is moving into the starting lineup, but at 5,300, we're not really getting a true discount on him. So that's why he's not super chalky. But we're expecting Castle to see a bit more of a role on this team with Sohan out. Jeremy Sohan, I always forget. So I get why people are playing him, but again, I do still think there's better value on this slate. So he's showing up a little bit for me, but I'm not going to force him into lines. Let's see. Back on Wemby, yeah, just enough to be dangerous, Mo. We're not going crazy. I'm not looking at Pippen unless there's more injuries that happen. 50, Mr. 5, yeah, 50% randomization for NBA DFS is too much. I think you can look at like 5 to 15% and be fine. But I use 0. But that's because I tinker a bit more. Mr. Torrance said, might I ask if you are approaching this as getting 2 studs, i.e. Luka and Jokic, or more of an 8 to 10K with balance and value pieces? It's a studs and dud lineup for me. I'm trying to get in 2 studs, and there's a lot of value, which we haven't quite gotten to yet, but there's a good amount. You're getting to Barnes naturally. Let me see. Is Harrison Barnes showing up for me? He's not showing up for me. And I don't really like he's seeing plenty of minutes. He's just a low usage guy. I think you can do better, but not an awful last piece. Champagny, Julian, another guy I'm just not really getting to. It's a low total game, guys, so I'm not really trying to force exposure here. Trey Mann could be the man tonight, Jesse, but it all depends on LaMelo and his status. Once we get that news, we'll know. For the Rockets, let's see. Any injury news here that we should talk about? None of them stood out. Again, low total game, so not a game I'm trying to get cute with. Dylan Brooks is questionable. Terry Eason's questionable. If he's out, really mixture of both. But if Eason and Brooks are out, I mean, it really just boosts Amen Thompson at 4,600. Again, not the best matchup against the Spurs, and we do already have a lot of really good value, but he's not an awful play. He's really the only guy I would consider. But again, that's if Dylan Brooks and Eason are out. Maybe even one or the other. He'll probably see like 25 if just one of 25 minutes if only one of them are out. But I think he could see up to 30 if they're both out. So I'm not really overly excited about Amen unless both Eason and Brooks end up getting ruled out. And it seems like they're only dealing with an illness, so I doubt that's going to happen. So ultimately, Rockets aren't really a team I'm looking at too much. All right, this Cavs against the Pelicans game was one that I wanted to take a shot on. We hit on Garland on Monday, which was clutch. That was sweet. But today, I don't love the matchup against the Pelicans. We do have some injury news. Like, Karis LeVert is questionable, but he's always like, he misses games. Okoro starts. Okoro does nothing. It doesn't really change things too much one way or the other for me. And again, I don't love the matchup. Game total is relatively low, 223, relatively widespread. Pretty boring game for me. None of them are showing up naturally in the DS, and so pretty easy pass here. Pelicans. Oh, the Pelicans. Let's see. When it comes to injury news, Zion Williamson is questionable. CJ McCollum is out. Murray's been out. So there's definitely some injury news here. Jose Alvarado is questionable. Jordan Hawkins is questionable. We could get more value on this slate if these guys end up getting ruled out. The most important one is Zion. If he's out, then that's a great boost to Ingram for sure, especially with CJ already missing. And that's part of why the Alvarado news is important, because he starts now with CJ McCollum out. And so we have to wait and see what happens from an injury news perspective. But if we are missing guys, Ingram is someone I don't want to forget about. The matchup is tough, but he's the only guy here. And hopefully his ownership won't go up too much, where I can just have like 10 to 15% exposure to Ingram and still be over the field. But that will just depend on how much injury news we get. From there, we might have to consider guys like Jordan Hawkins if he plays. If Alvarado gets ruled out, we'll also have to look at guys like Brandon Boston. If both Hawkins and Alvarado end up getting ruled out, again, we do have really good value on this slate, but these are still guys I would consider even in a tough matchup, just because they will see minutes if these guys end up missing. So once again, stay in the Discord, check injury news. Is not one of those slates you can just make your line and go from there. We'll have to keep a really close eye on what's happening there. For the Bulls, once again, injury news city. I really wanted to make Josh Giddey like the thumbnail for the show, but I didn't do that. More so, I was just kind of pissed at him for disappointing us on Monday. But if Zach LaVine ends up getting ruled out, I am more than willing to go back here. The main reason for that is that this is the highest total game on the slate, and so I want exposure to it. The tough part is, once again, I don't really know how to get exposure to it yet, because Zach LaVine is questionable. If Zach LaVine plays, I want exposure to Zach LaVine at 7,200. He's not pricey. The matchup's not tough or not awful, so I want some exposure there. Nikola Vucevic, again, there's a lot of really good center options on this slate. He is one of the more explosive centers when he gets going. I am never afraid to pick on the Dallas Mavericks when it comes to playing bigs against him or them. And they're also, we'll get to the Mavs, but they have some news too, which makes the matchup a bit softer. So we have to wait and see with Zach LaVine. If he doesn't play, that makes, we already know from Monday, Josh Giddey, Kobe White, Ayo, much more viable plays. But if he does play, the only guy I'm looking at is Vucevic and Zach LaVine. And then none of these guys are showing up naturally outside of Ayo a little bit. And as of right now, he's not a play I would force in. I only really like him if Zach LaVine ends up getting ruled out. I see y'all's comments, guys. Some of these I'll have to wait until the end of the show because running out of time a little bit. Not really, but just want to make sure we get through all these games first. For the Dallas Mavericks going up against the Chicago Bulls, when it comes to injury news, Dallas, they're missing some guys. PJ Washington is out. That is why we have a lot of value on this slate, because with PJ Washington out, we're expecting Najee Marshall to start at $3,400 for his salary. That is way too cheap for starting power forward who we have projected to see 30 minutes. He's going to be the chalk of the slate, but for good reason. again, this is one of those situations we have to continue to keep an eye out for the starting lineup. If Najee doesn't start for whatever reason, whoever starts instead becomes the viable play because they're all under 3K. So we don't really have to play guys coming off the bench today because we have guys who are normally bench players who are starting, who are significantly way too cheap for their position. So PJ Washington being out is a godsend for value. Derek Lively is doubtful. That really solidifies Daniel Gafford as a really good center option on this slate. The Bulls aren't really a great defense. They're playing at a faster pace this season. Losing a guy like Alex Caruso will do that to you. And so Daniel Gafford with no Derek Lively and a good pace matchup, we know he's a good offensive player. And that's usually my biggest concern when it comes to playing backup centers is like, hey, will he actually score? But Gafford is in a great spot, great matchup, and it's great for Vucevic as well. So I like both sides of this game. Gafford is chalky, and that's chalk I'm going to eat. We've touched on, but I haven't really emphasized a lot of the chalk that I'm basically fading on this slate. But this is where I'm going heavy because it's the highest total, and it's a good game environment. So, yeah, Gafford, Marshall, you can tell they're showing up in a ton of my lines. I have a 15% min on Luka Doncic. You might ask yourself, why do I have that when he's showing up in 57% of my lines? Part of that is because as we get news, lineups and projections change and adjust, and so we'll continue to get different variations. The important thing to me is that I still have exposure to these studs. Luka is the stud I want the most exposure to, at least as of right now, primarily because it is the highest total game, so I don't hate eating that chalk. Let's see. Kyrie Irving is showing up in about 23% of my lines. Again, highest total game. I want to make sure I have exposure to these guys. Kyrie is in a good spot. His price tag at 8,200 is very viable. He's fine. I'm not forcing him in, but the DS likes him, and that's where I'm comfortable. I don't want to be under the field on Kyrie, so I will keep a good watch on his exposure and just kind of make sure it stays close to where it is. Okay, this is the game, though. This is where there's value. This is why we can play just about everybody. You forced in Şengün. Not my favorite spot for him, but, you know, we know he has upside. I don't hate it. Rick, anything but Tatum revenge against Steve Kerr narrative, benching him in the Olympics? I like Tatum, so I'll run with that narrative, Rick. But I don't really think there's too much to it, but I am going to be over the field on Tatum today too. Payne's out, McBride night. I wouldn't quite say that, but it does make McBride slightly more viable. Madden Data 3 for NBA DFS, I keep things really simple because I like to control it a bit more. For other sports, it's good to have a bit more randomization. For NBA, you really want to go heavy on the guys you like and have leverage over the field on them. And then you want to kind of get a rotation going outside of there. If you don't feel as comfortable having guys you like or having guys that you want to be over the field on, that's when you use more uniques. That's when you use more randomization. But I've never taken down a tournament that way, so that's not my approach. But I know some people like to do it that way. Buckeye said, would you just force them in from the high total teams on the Dom station? Yeah, that's exactly what I do. So like I have a 15% min on Luka, Kyrie. So I don't force mins if I don't have to. If they're showing up already, I don't worry about it. And so like there's a such thing as over tinkering. When you put mins on people who are already showing up, things start to get messy. So the only guy who wasn't showing up for me the way I wanted them to was Luka in my early runs. And so that's why I still have that 15% min. And I really like Gafford today. And so that's why I have a like on him just to kind of make him show up even more. And Najee's already showing up that much. But when you look at the other side of this game, this is where I'm going to have to put some mins. I already have that 5% min on Vucevic. And depending on the Levine news, that's where I'm going to put mins on guys like Giddey and White and Ayo if he's out. I'll probably just put him in on Levine if he ends up playing today. Thunder are disappointing. Not in the literal sense, just in the DFS sense. I usually like to take some shots on these guys, but they are pretty healthy, so it's hard to force exposure here, and they're playing the Knicks, or they're playing the Nuggets, who are a bit banged up, but still hard to force exposure here because they're priced appropriately. So no one's standing out for me too much from this OKC team, and no one's showing up in my lines. And because we've already touched on some of the really good game environments, and we're about to talk about one of the best, hard for me to get overly excited here. The Nuggets. This Nuggets team, they cannot catch a break. When it comes to injury news for these guys, let's see, what are we dealing with? Aaron Gordon, out. Jamal Murray, out. These are huge pieces of news. And this is why we have the value we do, because now Russell Westbrook should be starting at 5K. We know, like, Russell Westbrook's not the most talented NBA player, but at 5K, he will take shots. He will get assists, especially playing with Jokic. And, the rebound part is a little bit more questionable playing with Jokic, but he's going to be very involved. He will have a high usage rate. That's just the way it is. My excitement for him could change if he ends up not starting for whatever reason, but he will start. He's been starting, so I'm comfortable with continuing to go here at 5K and being significantly over the field. And then Jokic is the other stud I'm forcing exposure to. With Aaron Gordon and Jamal Murray out, his usage rate increases. I'm not going too crazy. I'm not forcing him into being a leverage player or anything like that, because we have seen some trends where Jokic does sometimes struggle when he doesn't play with Jamal Murray or even guys like Aaron Gordon. Even though his usage rate goes up, his production can sometimes decrease. But playing with a guy like Russell Westbrook, I think, could keep him pretty involved. And so there's a lot of shade that just went through my mind that I'm just going to filter out and not touch on so we can get to questions. But I do still want to have exposure and be over the field to Jokic. That's why you see that 15% min, Russell Westbrook's core play, and then Peyton Watson with Aaron Gordon out. Watson should start here, and that's why he's as chalky as he is, and he's only 3,400 at the power forward position. He's showing up in the vast majority of my lines, and I am very, very comfortable with that. So I have a ton of exposure to the Nuggets, and this is part of the value I was talking about. Both sides, like not both sides, but both the Mavs and the Nuggets, a lot of value. This last game is gross. Tyler Hero is showing up just naturally. I don't really love this spot for him. He's 6,600. He plays good minutes. He has a good usage rate. But he didn't really stand out for me too much. He's showing up in 32% of my lines. Let me check. Actually, I think the sim model did like him a little bit. 6,600. Tyler Hero. Yeah, the sim model did like him a bit, but it does like guys like Suggs and Miles Turner a bit more, who have softer matchups. Different positions, but those are guys that, like, you see Suggs, I'm over the field on Hero. Duran, I like more. I am going to just boost Turner just a bit with that softer matchup. He makes me nervous, but it's fine. Hero, what am I going to do here? What's his ownership? 16% Tyler Hero. Let me look at his recent production. How's he been doing? Tyler Hero makes me nervous. Just anytime there's like a chalky Tyler Hero on a large slate, which I should be biased to play Hero because he's made me a lot of money over the years. 6,600. Okay, like he needs 40-point upside. He did that against Sacramento. He's done that against New York. Tough matchups. So he's in good form. Did struggle against Washington, but I think that was like more of a blowout or foul trouble than anything. I don't love it though. Hero is, where's he showing up primarily? Okay, so he's not showing up in the point guard position, which is where I feel like there's a lot of good plays. He's showing up primarily in that shooting guard spot, which we already talked about. I don't love this position tonight, so that makes him a bit more viable for me. I get it. It's just not a great position, and so that's why he's showing up. Not something I would go too crazy on, but it's logical at a weak position tonight. And then the Suns, they are going up against the Heat. And I'll double check. There's no real injury news here for them either, which just decreases my interest in them. Phoenix. Huh. Yeah, but no real injury news here. Bradley Beal's back. Nurkic looks like his projection is okay, but yeah, none of these guys are showing up for me on a slate where we have a lot of actual good value. So I'm going to do another run in the DS and refresh projection 615, and then we'll answer some questions and just kind of talk through this slate a bit more. All right, let's see. Thomas, yeah, I'm not really on Clay today. I just didn't get there. Let's see. What is his ownership? This is the highest total game, though, so we shouldn't just write it off. 5,700. Let's see. 5,700 for Memphis. Oh, not Memphis. Dallas. Yeah, he's just not standing out for me too much. He hasn't really shown a lot of upside outside of that first game of the season where he had a 40-point game, but he's shown no sign of that really since. And the game environment is good, but the matchup's still not the easiest, so he didn't stand out for me too much. I prefer literally every other starter besides Clay. Let's see. Buckeye said, I meant from the team men's, not individual player men's. Okay. Would you force? I meant from the team minutes, not individual player minutes. You just force them in from the high total teams in the Dom station. Oh, so like a team. I see what you're saying. Like an exposure minimum for the entire team? No. I think that's probably getting a little too cute. LaMelo's playing. All right, great. That's a little disappointing. I kind of wanted to play Trey Mann, but it does make it easier. We don't have to go too crazy here. Westbrook starts to get crazy or a little scary for me too, Harlock, but not at this point. At 5K, I'm not really overly concerned. Once he starts to creep into like that 6K, $6,500 range, that's when I get nervous. Yeah, I get it, Thomas. Like, if I was 20 maxing, I would try to get him in like one or two lines, try and get 10%. But like I said, there's so many great center options today. We have Gafford, Duran, Turner, Cat, all at lower price tags than Jokic and AD. Looks like AD is starting to show up in a few more of my lines, by the way, too. And Vucevic, who I like a lot, who are all just cheaper. So I understand. I wouldn't go out of my way to force exposure to Jokic in my 20 max lines on a 10-game slate. There are centers I like a bit more, so I don't think that's bad. Most that I have 10% Hero in my 20 max. Yeah, I'm fine with that. Hero's not my favorite play. He just makes sense at the shooting guard position because it's weak. Devin said, what chalk should we stay away from? All right, Devin. Good question. Good question. A little bit of pressure, but good question. Let me start by ownership. So love Najee, love Russell Westbrook, love Watson, love Gafford. Hart is where I start to get a bit more nervous. 6,300. We know he has upside. Matchup isn't bad against the Hawks, but there's power forwards and small forwards I just like more than Hart at cheaper price tags. And so he's just not someone I'm going to be at field weight on because I would rather pay down with Marshall and Watson or pay up with guys like LeBron, Franz Wagner, even guys like OG Anunoby at 5K. I just like people both higher and lower than him price-wise, and so he's not really worth me getting exposure to today. Golden State's news is out. Sweet, so nothing too crazy. Rick said connect or Strother, last man in. For me, it's hard to answer that right now. I think the answer will easily be connect if he ends up, if Rui ends up getting ruled out tonight. But if he's not, then I think Strother's a very viable option too. Let me see what some of this news looks like. See if we have anything interesting going on. So yeah, for now it's Strother, and then if Rui's out, I would lean towards connect. I just like his upside a bit more. Let's see. Okay. Looking at Underdog, NBA. Dylan Brooks is available. All the Pelicans are game time decisions. Anthony Davis is a game time decision. Andrew Nembhard is available to play. So that doesn't... I wanted exposure to Mathurin, but and he's still a fine play on the slate, but I'm not going to force exposure there. So I'm going to take that off of him. I just want to make sure I didn't forget about him if Nembhard did end up getting ruled out. Curry won't have a minutes restriction. Doesn't change too much for me. Podziemski is out. So high total game. Low owned Steph, 8,800. No Podziemski. What's the total? Matchup is tough. Let me see. How has Steph done against Drew? Let's see. Boston. Okay. Not seeing the best results here so far. I'm considering taking a shot on Steph. But yeah, he lacks upside pretty consistently. And he's 8,800. We've seen him score like 46, 50 fantasy points, but not the kind of upside I really want here on a slate like this, where I think there are some guys who really go off who I am forcing exposure to already. So yeah, I'm not going to go there. Kerr said Curry won't have a minutes restriction. Thanks. I don't know why I started over that. Should we play two studs at point guard? I think we definitely can. Let me look here again. It really just depends on who you mean counting as studs. Like, I would prefer kind of like a Luka LeBron or Luka Tatum pairing, or even like adding Jokic in the mix. Let me see. When I look at the pay up options on this slate, yeah, I don't really like Trae Young. I don't really like SGA. LaMelo's fine, but I'm not trying to get there. Ja's really the only other pairing option, so maybe like a Doncic Ja, but I still don't love it. So I don't really like pairing two stud point guards together in the same line. I would rather go another position, but that's just because I like the other guys a bit more. Yeah, like Luka, Tatum, Jokic, that's a combination I like a bit more. Are you going over on Kyrie or just matching? As of right now, I'm over the field by 2%. So basically matching the field. Idea on stacked lineup. Chris, for NBA DFS, you don't really stack too much. I am just naturally having a lot of lines that have a lot of Dallas and Nuggets players because those are the guys who are missing guys. So it's not something I'm forcing, but it's happening pretty naturally. So typically I would say no, but I'm okay with it on this slate. I'm also seeing like Michael Porter Jr. start to pop a lot for me, which again, without Aaron Gordon, I'm totally comfortable with. The matchup against the Thunder is a little concerning. Like, let me look a little bit closer at this. Let's see here. Because I like the idea of playing Michael Porter Jr., but the Thunder are not a defense to, Michael Porter tends to do better in softer matchups. Yeah, he'll probably see a good amount of Lou Dort, Jalen Williams, pretty solid defenders. Even Russell Westbrook will see SGA, but I'm not overly concerned about that at his price tag. Michael Porter, 6,200. How's he done? Yeah, he usually struggles against OKC. But given the increasing usage, I don't hate it. But this could be a spot. What's his ownership at? 16% is not bad. I don't think he'll remain a core play for me. I'm still going to make some quick changes after the show just to kind of adjust my core. But I'm comfortable being around this 40% number. I like to see Watson increase a bit more and Suggs increase a bit more. I'm okay with Luka continuing to fall just because I want to be around like 20-25% at the end of the day for a 150 maxing. So we will see. I'll see if y'all have any more questions. If not, I'll go ahead and jump and work on this leverage sheet. Jose said, do you go 100% on anyone or cap at a certain percent? So great question. I thought I was going to cap someone today, but I ended up not doing it. It was Najee Marshall. Once I saw his ownership at 61%, it made sense for me to be around 99%. I don't 100% anyone, but I do allow up to 99%. So for me, it's guys like Najee Marshall, who I'm allowing that much exposure to. Russell Westbrook, I would allow that much exposure to. That's probably it. Sometimes you'll see me cap exposure to guys, Jose, and I'm sure it will happen, just not today. If there's chalk I just really don't like. For me, the chalk I didn't like as much, I just naturally didn't have exposure to, so I didn't really have to cap anyone. Mr. Five said, any sleepers value? I think we touched on some of them throughout the show, but there's not really anyone who stood out to me too much besides the guys I have a ton of exposure to. My boy, what's up? It would be MPJ for me. Hield could be a little sneaky today, especially with Podziemski being ruled out. And it's a good game environment. But it's a tough matchup. And so you can shoot threes against good defenses, but Buddy does not make me feel as safe. I think MPJ is just a better play with Aaron Gordon out. But honestly, good question. I feel like a lot of people wouldn't ask. Let's see here. So yeah, we have the cores. We have this. I like what I have here. Anyone else not showing up the way I want them to? This Vucevic play is probably one of my favorite sneaky plays. I might boost this up even more, to be honest with you. And that's pretty much it. The biggest thing, guys, per usual, we really just have to keep an eye on the news and react when we get the information and the starting lineups, because those things do matter. If you're interested in that, we are more than willing to give advice. If you want to ask in the Discord, you can DM me, or in the group channels. I'm more than happy to answer those questions. But I wish you all nothing but luck tonight. I will see you all tomorrow, ideally, hopefully, if everything goes well. And good luck tonight. Peace out, y'all.